Hey everyone, I'm super excited today to be joined by the one and only Katie Couric, a journalist who I personally have looked up to for a long time. And I'm so excited for one of the first times I'm actually interviewing you rather than you interviewing me, which is very exciting. How are
Yeah,
you?
hi, Aaron. It's good to. Oh, there we go. My live button just flashed. I thought we're still connecting. It's great to see you. I'm a big admirer of yours, Aaron. I really appreciate your tireless work ethic and the fact that you are pretty much working 24/7. Sometimes I do feel sorry for your wife, uh, but because I can only imagine how connected you are to the news. Now, wait, I think our
No,
stuff is,
you're good. You're good.
well, okay. Because according to my phone, we have one person joining us, and I'm like, wow, we're really blowing it up here.
No. We're all good. We're live and we're all good. There are a lot of folks on here. I do want to jump in because this interview I think is going to be a little different. We could talk about some current event stuff later, but I want to know more about you and I want people to know more about you. So I guess my first question is, why did you even start journalism? Like, what made you want to become a journalist in the first place?
Well, it's probably what I wasn't good at as much as what I was good at. I was never great. I mean, I'm sort of a generation where I think girls were not encouraged to excel in things like math and science. And I think I think if I did excel in an area, I think it was in writing and sort of more language arts and public speaking. I've always been fairly confident. And I think that because I could write pretty well and write quickly, I was a master procrastinator. And I used to do my homework in front of the front door waiting for the bus to come. um, I thought, well, these are skills that could be put to good use. But my father was a print journalist. My
Mm,
dad was the editor of his college paper. He went to Mercer College, Mercer University in Macon, Georgia. And then he wrote for the Macon Telegraph. And then he wrote for the Atlanta Constitution. And then he was an editor at United Press in Washington, in Tallahassee, and then Washington, D.C. So I think my dad recognized that I had some abilities that might translate well to some kind of journalism career. And, it's interesting. I have my oldest sister passed away, but there were three girls and my brother, and I'm the youngest of four. And I think my parents were raising girls in really what was sort of the beginning of the feminist movement.
mhm,
My sisters, I was born in 1957. My sister Emily was born in 1947. My sister Clara, 1952. And my parents really wanted us to have careers. And
mm,
so they really pushed us to not only go to good colleges. I didn't get into Smith College where my sisters went, and it was so humiliating. But I ended up going to UVA, which probably was a better fit for me. But my point is that my parents really wanted us to have careers and be independent,
mhm,
because I think it was a generation where women were starting to enter the workforce en masse and kind of eschew more traditional roles like being a homemaker, like my mom primarily
mm.
was.
Well, was your impetus when you going into journalism to be kind of that print journalist to write, or did you know that you eventually wanted to be on TV or radio, do something different from your father?
Well, I worked at radio stations while I was in college in Washington, D.C., and I worked in the news department of WAVA, which was an all news radio station. I also worked at WMAL, and they put me in the sales department
Mm,
to sell radio time. And I would basically shadow an account executive, and I think people thought I would be good in sales because I'm pretty outgoing and, what do they say? Ice to the Eskimos. I could
yeah.
do that. But I realized that sales was not sort of quite intellectually stimulating enough for me, with all due respect for people in sales, because that requires a lot of skill and persistence. But I decided I really was more attracted to to covering news and being more editorially focused. So I I didn't necessarily want to be in television. I think I tried to get a job at the Washington Post and was rejected. I've
Mhm.
had a lot of rejection, Aaron,
Don't we
and
all?
rejected from my college, my first choice, and rejected from the Washington Post. But I think because I worked in radio, that kind of made me interested in more broadcast journalism. And when I graduated from college, I decided, gosh, I'll try to get a job at ABC News in Washington or one of the networks, news networks, or news divisions in Washington. And I ended up getting a job at ABC News, and then I went to CNN before it even went on the air in 19 God, oh my God, I'm so old, Aaron. But anyway, and it I was very lucky. I worked hard, and I think timing is everything. Hopefully, I have some skills, but I think it was a confluence of timing, more jobs opening up for women in
Mhm.
television news, and you know, people like Tim Russert recognizing something in me and asking me to if I'd be interested in being the deputy Pentagon correspondent for NBC. So I was just very, very lucky all along the way, but I also worked really hard.
I am curious to know because TV was relatively new, right? I mean, people weren't not everyone had TVs, and I say that
I'm
not
not
to
that
not
old, Aaron.
no, no, but I say it because we talk a lot about social media today and how
Mhm.
social media is changing journalism, and I wanna hear your thoughts about how TV really changed journalism because it went from a solely print industry, then to print and radio, and then to television, and I think that was very novel for a lot of people.
Well, I mean, I think television afforded this immediacy when it came to the news. I think it obviously, you know, you didn't have to write in an evocative way. You wrote to pictures, and the pictures really told the story, the film and now video. And so I think what it did, it created a much more immersive experience. Although radio and print, I mean, I have so much respect for people in all different arenas of journalism, but I think it just, to be able to see these important events like the civil rights movement, to see people, being attacked with dogs and fire hoses, to actually have correspondence in Vietnam, to see Walter Cronkite become visibly emotional when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I think it provided this kind of emotional connection for viewers that made the experience a much more 360 one, I think, in many ways. And so I think it changed the viewer's experience dramatically and also changed the reporter's experience because suddenly you not only had to be there as an eyewitness to history, but you had to really be able to communicate and speak and translate and distill often complicated topics and events and help the audience understand them. So I do think probably broadcast news and television requires a different skill set than just plain writing or just even radio reporting. But there's a lot of overlap
Right.
among all those mediums.
I will say, and then in 2017, you kind of made the jump, one of the first to really go into this independent media route, start your own media company. Why make the jump and why then? Because you really were a trailblazer in many respects by leaving mainstream media.
Well, it's interesting because I did it even earlier than that because I joined Yahoo
Mm,
News, and I thought that whatever organization or media entity could somehow combine technology and content and media, that they would win the day. And I thought Yahoo had this enormous audience, and they had the and this incredible, you know, tech infrastructure, that would be potentially a place that could really redefine how news was not only created, but also how it was consumed. They were pretty slow with mobile. And I remember it's funny, Aaron, when I was at CBS, there was this guy there, and I wish I could remember his name, but I remember as early as 2008, he said, it's all going to be about phones. Our
mm.
mobile phones are going to take over. And I think people in a more traditional media environment there's all sorts of psychological reasons that they don't wanna necessarily embrace change, partially because the people in charge benefit from maintaining the status quo. Um, but I think I did it for a few reasons. I had done most of the big jobs in network news. I had anchored the Today Show, I anchored the CBS Evening News. There really weren't any other jobs for me to do in traditional television news, although I would have been happy probably doing long form pieces for 60 Minutes or even Sunday Morning. But I had such a bad experience at CBS because I think they were very resistant to the
Mm,
change that I was brought in to help propel. And also, I think they're probably the most sexist old school network, to be honest with you. And that's been borne out with some of the changes we've seen. Don't get me started on what's happening there. But anyhow, I saw. I think one thing I am good at is I'm pretty prescient. Like I read so much and I watch how things are changing, and I saw clearly that the news business was changing before my eyes, that people were consuming it differently, that the viewers for traditional, say, evening news telecasts were broadcasts were getting older and older. I used to be so excited when there was like an ad for Herbal Essence shampoo instead of Depends and Preparation H and Doxidan or whatever that stuff is. Um, so so I think I just realized that I didn't wanna be riding on the back of a
mm.
dinosaur. I wanted to be part of the way people were getting news and information. Plus, I never been very entrepreneurial. I had worked in traditional environments, and I thought it would be fun to try something else, and honestly, nobody would hire me in network news at that point.
Oh,
What can
wow.
I say?
I I do have some rapid fire questions that folks have been asking me to ask you.
Oh,
Um, in
how
your
many people are
career,
watching this? I'm just curious.
4.6.
4.6 thousand.
Wow.
We have a
Hi,
lot of
everyone. Aaron, see, by the way, you all didn't hear me praising Aaron before you all joined us for what he's doing. I said sometimes I feel sorry for his wife because he is plugged in 24/7. But I think he's doing such an incredible job helping
thank you.
people understand what's going on. And I just applaud you. And I'm such a fan, Aaron. So I want people to
Thank you.
understand that from the get-go.
Thank you, Katie. That means a lot. My one question, a lot of folks have had for you is if you had to name one person, your favorite interview in your career, who would it be? And
That
no, Sarah Palin cannot be the answer.
Yeah, well, I would not put her in the category of my favorite interview, maybe my most important interview, because I do think it had an impact. I often think, would that interview today have the same impact because everyone is in their own bubbles and they've created their own media ecosystem. Gosh, I've done a lot of interviews, everyone watching, and it's sort of like picking your favorite meal, like you can enjoy like a delicious Italian restaurant, but you also loved sushi you had. So, but the one interview I really loved was Herman Wouk,
Mm,
um, the author who wrote Winds of War. He was just this incredibly charming, lovely man, and just so winning. I just really, really loved Herman Wouk. The other person I really loved is a guy named Irving Fratkin.
okay.
He was from Fall River, Mass. He died a couple of years ago. He created this Dollars for Scholars program, and in his town, he was an optometrist. I think he was yes, he was an optometrist, not an ophthalmologist. He was an optometrist, and he asked everyone in the town to donate $1 so people who were from difficult circumstances could afford to go to college.
Mm,
And it transformed into this organization called Scholarship America. And he sent so many kids to school. And I interviewed him on my talk show. I've renamed it my Stupid Talk Show, even though some of the stuff was not so stupid. But I was just really not fit for, I was not really created to do a daytime talk show. I think it's not really my jam. But anyway, Irving Fratkin came on and we brought all these kids that he had sent to college. And I mean, the amount of money this organization has raised is just phenomenal. And so I love interviewing people who have made the world a better place and really contributed to society. And then there's, of course, George Clooney and Hugh
Mhm.
Jackman. They were pretty nice too.
I can imagine those those must all be amazing interviews. Another question some folks had is if you're talking to the younger version of yourself, the person who's just starting out in news media, what would you tell her? What piece of advice would you have for young Katie Couric?
Oh, well, plastics. I'm just kidding. That's from The Graduate, everyone. Sometimes I feel like the cultural references I use are so old. My assistant was with me yesterday and I realized I had a CD in my car. Okay, that's bad enough. But I put it on and it was the Partridge Family. And she said, I don't mean to be rude or stupid, but who is the Partridge Family?
I don't know who the Partridge Family is.
You don't?
I don't.
I hope somebody watching. Good Lord. Yeah, you're like 17 or something, Aaron. The Partridge Family, they're very big culturally for people my age. I'm 68. So, David Cassidy and I Think I Love You. So what am I so afraid of? I'm afraid that I'm not sure of. A love there is no cure for. A lot of people in the comments like or love the Partridge Family. Okay, good. You have a lot of old viewers, Aaron. But anyway, what would I say to my younger self? Well, first of all, I think journalism is one of the most gratifying and satisfying professions. I think if you are really interested in helping people understand the world and see it as a public service, which I always have in many ways, um, I still think it's a wonderful profession. Now, it's very different, obviously, than it was in 1970 excuse me, when I got into the business. But I think that you have to be much more innovative. You have to make sure you're technologically savvy, that you can report, that you can edit. I mean, it's amazing.
Mm,
Anybody with an iPhone and curiosity and somebody who really wants to understand what's going on in the world and share it with others can now be a journalist.
yep.
So the price of entry, as we've seen with you, Aaron, is much lower, right? I mean, you'd have to go into local news and hope that you'd go to a network back in the day, hope, be a general assignment reporter, maybe then be given a role at the State Department or Pentagon or Capitol Hill. And then hopefully, it's a
Yeah.
long process. And look what you've created at this very young age because you have a ring light and a phone
Yep.
and a law degree and a lot of curiosity and interests and you feel like you're providing a real service which you are. So I would say learn all the skills you can. Writing is still a really important skill that many people can't do because you people just text and you never write
True.
sentences. And I think communicating and really understanding people, I think that it's really important to be in person, even though I do a lot of my things virtually. I think that to create a platform and also to fill a need. Like I do think niche specialty journalism is very valuable. I
Mm.
follow someone named Jessica Nernick, who, huh? Nurick, sorry, not Nernick. Sorry, Jessica Nurick. It rhymes with Couric, so I should remember that. Jessica Nurick, and she is a public health expert and a scientist, and she debunks. I don't know if you follow Jessica. She debunks a lot of the Maha BS that's
Oh,
floating around. And she has created an incredible platform for herself. Similarly, Liz Oyer,
Liz is great. Yeah.
I interviewed Liz after she was fired, and she was the head pardon attorney, everyone, for the Department of Justice. And now she helps really help people understand certain things that are happening at the DOJ because she has so much experience working in that at that institution. So I would say it's also not a bad idea to develop an area of expertise
Mm,
and really kind of dig into that. but I think it does take a lot more ingenuity and, to really have an impact now. But listen, I have so much respect for people who write for the New Yorker and the Atlantic and the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and have developed a deep understanding of issues. I'm one of those people who really respects expertise. So if you have a deep knowledge base in of some area and you want to help share it, then that's a good way to start in journalism too.
Well, I gotta ask you about that part of it because I think a lot of there's so much discourse on the internet about the future of media, whether mainstream media is dead, dying, whether or not these cable newsrooms that really were the number one place people got their news from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whether that's still going to exist today or even in a few years from now. What's your take on all of this? Where do you see media going, and do you think that mainstream media, in a way, can recover from what we've seen over the past several years?
I think it's going to be a mixed bag. I think some will and some won't. You know, I think probably we'll see the end of evening newscasts probably in the next 5 years, replaced by maybe more local newscasts because I
Mm,
think people do tend to be more connected with their local stations more than their network news. Um, you know, I think that there, you know, it's so fragmented. Jim Vandehei of Axios talks about shards of glass, which is kind of a fancy but not particularly original way of thinking about the news landscape as it
mhm.
exists today. You know, uber fragmented. And I think, you know, we've also heard a lot about the death of monoculture, where we have a shared experience
Right.
all relying on the same source of information, and that's created obviously even more polarization. But I'm not sure. I hope that great publications that attract the best and the brightest, like the New Yorker and like the Atlantic and like the New York Times and all the publications I mentioned before, will remain strong. I think that all these organizations have to very smartly diversify their portfolios, right?
Mhm.
And figure out ways that they can monetize the content they're creating. The New York Times has done that very well with New York Times Cooking and games and all that. Um, so I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. As somebody who worked in a network news division, I think there is a lot of benefit getting your news from people. You know, the one criticism people have had of folks like you, with all due respect, is, you know, you're one person, you're not part of a
Right.
huge network. You don't have, you know, a scientist who can interpret a medical study that showed that lithium can be helpful in dealing with Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah.
You know, with a network, a whole constellation of expertise, you can just rely on
Right.
somebody to kind of go to right away. Now, you can do interviews with people, and that's good, but sometimes it's great to have someone who knows the people at the CDC, right?
I
Who,
agree.
you know, so those networks provide those experts and reporters who have spent their lives covering the environment, for example, or climate change, or poverty in America, or all kinds of medical issues. I mean, they have deep, deep, deep expertise. And that
Yeah.
I think is invaluable. So I would like, you know, I think that you know, mainstream media is such a huge blanket moniker, but I do think that you know that these organizations, I hope they continue to thrive, and I think they're going to have to be reimagined if they do, if they're able to.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree, and I actually tell everyone that I shouldn't be your only news source, right? Like, diversifying news, getting news from different places is good because I'm only one person, and many of these companies, and I tell everyone that I never attack individual journalists per se. There's so many great individual journalists at the Atlantic, the New Yorker, like you were saying. To me, it's more the problem with the institution rather than any one journalist. And to that, I do want to ask you, because we've lived through Trump 1 and now you're covering Trump 2. And I think the attack on the institutions this time around has really been different than we've ever seen before. What has been the difference for you covering Trump now versus back in 2016? And are you ever afraid that he may come after you next?
Well, the first part of the question, I think that he is so much more unbridled and unhinged in terms of his attacks and lack of respect for all institutions, whether it's legal institutions, medical institutions, scientific institutions. He's so much more empowered and is really stretching this idea of executive. What is I always forget the expression for the way Stephen Miller and the whole Trump administration thinks about the executive branch, that they should have sort of unlimited authority. What is that called? Does anybody watching this remember the word? It's called ex- executive. I know you guys know what I'm talking
I
about.
know what you're talking about, but I don't know them.
Anyway, okay, somebody in the
Oh,
comments.
a unitary executive.
Yes. And he's really taking that to heart and obviously exercising that. So in 2016, I think he did have people who tried to put the brakes on him or uh, monitor or restrict some of his worst instincts. And
Mhm.
I think they don't exist anymore. So I think that is the biggest difference, that he's just much more dangerous this go round. And so that's what I would say. What is it? Unitary executive?
Yeah.
Unitary is executive theory, which is basically, giving the middle finger to checks and balances and, making sure that all three branches of government have equal power. But anyway, um, and so I'm covering him much more openly. I was trained not to give my opinion on things. And now that I don't work for a corporation, I could never be as outspoken or talk to the people I'm talking to if I worked for NBC or CBS. I'm sure I would get fired. Like Terry Moran, although what Terry Moran tweeted was not a good look if you're a network reporter, even though I think he's doing great work now and I have nothing against him. But you know, what he was saying,
Sure.
there has to be some kind of, if you're a reporter or an anchor on a network newscast, you can't really be quite as outspoken as he was in that social media post. But anyway, um, I'm not. Am I worried that Trump will come after me? I don't think he pays much attention to me, to be honest with you. He called me a has-been already when I did a documentary on gun violence, and he was trying to get money from the NRA. Um, I think there's so many people sort of in the category of trying to call him out on the stuff that he's doing and making sure people understand why it's dangerous and unprecedented,
Mhm.
that he's probably not particularly worried about me. I also think he's obsessed still with news on TV.
Sure.
That's really focuses his time. And it's interesting, Aaron, when I went to see if I could do an interview with him when I worked at Yahoo and I went to his office. That was such an interesting experience. Had a big desk, giant desk, and it was covered in magazine articles, magazines where he was on the cover. So,
Oh,
like,
wow.
if it was Time magazine, he probably like six times deep, six magazine deep, all over his office. And he was like, "Can you believe this?" Because I knew him when he was on The Apprentice, and I
Right.
even dressed like him one Halloween. Which is really scary to think about. But, I just think that he's really not. Oh, what I was gonna say, he really didn't understand digital news at all, which, of course, was just
Yeah.
coming to the forefront, and, he couldn't understand, like, why I would do an interview with him for the Yahoo audience, and back then, I don't even think he used email. This was in
Mm.
2016. So I don't think he's particularly digitally savvy. I think they've hired a lot of people who are. If you look at the White House account, you can tell they're obviously trying to be much smarter and kind of more modern. Um, but I think he probably, unless someone says something to him, he probably thinks I'm dead or something.
We'll see if you get a Truth Social post after this. For folks who are
By
on
the
here,
way, wait, can I ask you, Aaron, something? And then I know you have to go. How many
yeah.
people are watching this? 6.6. Oh, well, that's so nice because it says on my phone that one person is watching this. And it's making me very depressed. No, look. What do you think of all this crazy stuff about Trump's health that's been circulating all weekend? So many of my friends are asking me about it and saying, what's going on? And even my husband was like, maybe we're not paying enough attention when it comes to Trump's health. And I do know he has that big bruise and his ankles are swollen. Um, but it seems like there have been a lot that people online are really taking this ball and running with it. How can you explain? How do you explain it?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, there are a lot of speculation, a lot of conspiracy theories out there that just people's kind of hopium. This is maybe what some people want, and therefore that's kind of the narrative they're pushing. I think truthfully, the facts are: listen, he's the oldest president in American history, right? He has been diagnosed with this chronic venous insufficiency that's caused his swelling of his ankles. He does have these undisclosed bruisings on his hand. Now, the White House, or undescribed, the White House says that it's because he's shaking hands all the time, but President Biden shook hands and didn't have that same bruising.
No, I mean, honestly, that is such a ridiculous explanation.
It doesn't make any sense to me. To me, I think here's the thing. Like, if this is truly the most transparent White House in history, like they like to say, then Trump's doctor should get in front of the press and answer questions. Because if this was President Biden with bruising on his hands, there would be significant outrage from Fox News and the right wing media. And I just think that we need to hold presidents to the same standards. Do I think that he's dying? Probably not. No, I think he's fine. He might have some bruising, he might have a health issue here or there. But the fact that they're not talking about it, and the fact that a president who literally responds to everything he sees on the internet went silent from the public for a week. And he's supposed to be speaking at any minute now. He's now 30 minutes late, but he went silent for a week. That to me is like, well, where is he? Like, why not? Like, what are you trying to hide? And so I think there are many more questions than there are answers right now.
Yeah, it's very interesting how it's just kind of gone viral, as they say.
I know. I know. It's pretty interesting. And folks who are on here, if you're not subscribed to Katie's Substack yet,
Oh,
please
thanks, Aaron.
subscribe today. Katie, I do have one final question for you. Um,
It better be a good one, Aaron.
I hope so. It's a bit of a loaded question.
Oh, God.
I guess my question for you is, what do you want to be known by when you retire, when you leave journalism finally? What's the
Is
mark
this
that
is this for I know what you're up. Is this for my obit?
No,
Is this so you can say, "Oh, Katie Kirk died. This is what she told me she wants to
no.
be remembered for."
No, I
I just
genuinely want to know, like, what
I'm
mark
not
do you
above
want people?
doing this myself, Aaron. I have done this plenty of time. Plenty of times. Katharine Hepburn, what do you want to be remembered for?
Well,
All
let me
sorts of
maybe I'm learning from the best. What can I say?
um well, first of all, I think I'm always going to work in some capacity because I am, as my colleagues at Katie Kirk Media say, I'm addicted to the grind. I like working. I love being engaged. I like to understand what's going on and I like to share it with people. That doesn't mean I don't like to unplug occasionally, which I try to do, but it's very hard for me. Honestly, I hope that I hope that I'm remembered, that I tried to be a straight shooter, that I care about issues that I think are really important, and that later in my career, I was free to talk about them. I care deeply about reproductive rights. I care deeply about LGBTQ issues, and I care deeply about uh, you know, income inequality and how to solve that. I care deeply about gun violence, and reducing it, obviously. Um, so I hope people think that I cared enough to try to help them understand the world around us. And I think though, I hope that people remember, recognize all the work I've done in cancer research. My husband, Aaron, you probably weren't even born yet. How old are you again?
26. I was born in 99.
Okay, you weren't born when my husband died in 1998 of colorectal cancer, which is on the rise among people in their 30s and 40s and even 20s now. But I really have focused much of my life since then on increasing awareness around cancer, specifically colon cancer, and trying to encourage people to get screened because early detection really does save lives. And I was also diagnosed with breast cancer a couple years ago. So I've been talking a lot about that and about the importance of breast ultrasounds for women who have dense breasts. My sister Emily died of pancreatic cancer. You really would have liked her. Everyone said she was going to be the first female governor of Virginia.
Oh, wow.
She was running for lieutenant governor with Mark Warner when she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and she died at just 54 years old. And I started Stand Up to Cancer with some other type A women really pissed off by the slow pace of cancer research in 2006. And we've raised over $800 million to support science and cancer researchers who collaborate instead of compete. They're called dream teams who focus on a specific approach or a specific cancer. So I hope that people see that I took a terrible tragedy losing my husband when our daughters were just 6 and 2 to trying to contribute somehow to the world of cancer research and awareness. So that's something that I'm enormously proud of. And I think my late husband would be really proud of it too.
I think so, and I mean, I don't know if you see the comments, but there are so many people who just love you and are just so proud of everything you've done and are so grateful for everything you've given them. So, Katie Couric, thank you so much. This was amazing.
Thank you, Aaron, for taking the time. You're awfully sweet to do this. And when is the president supposed to speak?
And the stream just went live. He'll be on in a minute, 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna let everybody go so we can watch. Aaron, big kiss. Thank you all for watching. Sign up. Please subscribe to my
Subscribe if you
Substack
haven't.
because we have to support all my team, like Julia.
Oh,
Say hi, Julia. Like
hi.
Julia and
Yeah,
everybody else who's
On the
helping me do
podcast.
this every day. Okay, sorry,
bye, guys.
Aaron. Okay, bye everyone. Bye.